Right, welcome back, everybody. Let's get into the interview now about what is happening today. So the Pietermaritzburg High Court is expected to hear former President Jacob Zuma's urgent application for a stay of his arrest pending his application at the Constitutional Court. This follows an earlier judgment by the Apex Court that sentenced Zuma to 15 months imprisonment for ignoring its ruling that he continue his testimony before the State Capture Commission. So the court had ordered that Zuma had until last Sunday to hand himself over to police, failing which Police Minister Bheki Cele and Police Commissioner General Khehla Sitole have until tomorrow to arrest him. The pair have since written to the Constitutional Court stating that the former president will not be arrested until the outcome of his rescission application, which is scheduled to be heard on Monday, the 12th of July. So for more on former president's legal woes, let's chat to Karyn Maughan, who of course is a legal journalist at News 24. Karyn, always a pleasure chatting to you. Thanks again for your time here on the program.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so this is one of those things that is going to test us to the max when it comes to the knowledge of the law here in South Africa. And if anybody knows it, it appears to be the president, because the former president, he manages to find a way through everything. But let's focus on the case at hand. So the Constitutional Court, it is the highest country in the land. We know this. And when it comes to the interpretation, protection and enforcement of the Constitution, it deals with constitutional matters. In those cases that raise questions about the application or interpretation of the Constitution, does the former president have a case to put forward today at the Pietermaritzburg High Court?
Well, problematically, Leanne, the state capture inquiry is saying that he has gone to completely the wrong court to seek to stay the execution of the committal warrants against him, which the police have been ordered to act on by Wednesday. They're saying that the Constitution explicitly states the Constitutional Court, the SCA, and the High Courts are all responsible for running their own processes. And while you can have a situation where a higher court can change or reverse or make amends on a particular judgment of a lower court, it is untenable for a lower court to then stay the orders issued by the Constitutional Court. They also argue that because it was the Constitutional Court whose integrity was so profoundly attacked by the former president, it must be that court that makes a determination as to whether a stay or an interdict in these particular circumstances should be granted. So one of the massive issues that's at play here, of course, is this argument that the High Court simply does not have the jurisdiction to hear this case. And extraordinarily, the inquiries actually said to Jacob Zuma in response to his stay execution application, go to the Constitutional Court, bring an interdict. We may actually change our minds, but what you're doing in this context is legally unsustainable, and we will oppose it for that reason.
So we see a letter come through this morning from the Office of the State Attorney, and this is to the acting Chief Justice, the care of the acting Registrar, the Constitutional Court. So here, this is to Justice Raymond Zondo, and the point that I'll read here is really just the last point. We saw it coming through this morning. In view of the unique situation presented by the developments and the legal matrix involved, our clients will, out of the respect of the unfolding litigation, the processes, hold further actions they are expected to take in terms of the Honourable Court's orders in abeyance pending the finalisation of the litigation, alternatively pending any directions the Honourable Acting Chief Justice may possibly issue regarding the conduct of the litigation and any other related matter relevant to the litigation. Help us understand that, because where does this leave us now?
Well, that is absolutely extraordinary, because even, someone any lawyer will tell you, you cannot defy, what they're effectively suggesting is that they're going to defy the court order issued by the Constitutional Court. They're asking the Chief Justice essentially to issue directions and to say, well, no, you must arrest. But the order speaks for itself, or you mustn't arrest. They can't. They've chosen not to get themselves involved in the litigation in terms of the either rescission or the interdict or stay application. But the law is very clear. Unless there is some form of interdict granted or an order that stays the execution of those orders, they must be acted upon. So for the police, to now do, in many respects, what is akin to what Jacob Zuma did when he sent that letter to the Constitutional Court saying, I'm not going to, provide any input on sanction and this is good enough. If they had a legal issue, they should have brought it in the context of the court, to write a letter to the Constitutional Court and effectively say to them, listen, just tell us that you actually want, pushing it back into their realm, saying you must let us know if he must be arrested or not. Otherwise, we're not going to arrest him. There is a standing court order.
Yeah.
It's undebatable. We'll see what happens in the High Court today. But if there isn't a stay of execution, the court order, the court orders must be acted upon. The police are bending over backwards to accommodate Jacob Zuma, and effectively they're essentially granting him the interdict that the inquiry says he's unlawfully seeking in the Pietermaritzburg High Court by effectively saying, well, we're not going to do anything unless the Constitutional Court says to us, no, you must do it. I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary, and I think a lot of people are going to be quite disturbed by this.
So where does that leave today's hearing? Because, if this letter's been sent off, you've got today's hearing, so in effect, what is the point?
Well, I think, Leanne, you have absolutely hit the nail on the head. Jacob Zuma has himself, in a manner that the inquiry says is incorrect, but he's himself acknowledged that you can't ignore an order or direct an order by the Constitutional Court. This is why he is in the High Court in the first place. So for the police, before that process even gets underway, to say, well, look, we're not going to act on these orders anyway, unless you tell us to, basically, or you issue directions. Why are we even in a courtroom? The police are acting manifestly unlawfully. They may say, well, we have concerns about the kind of rhetoric that's been espoused by the former president, the unhappiness and anxiety, the temperature in terms of people's feelings on this issue. That is not the issue. The law is the law. Yeah. If the police felt like this, they should have potentially also brought some form of stay application to the Constitutional Court and said, look, we have real fears about this. Please, can you stay this? There is no court order in place. There must be a court order that stays this. Otherwise, the police will be acting unlawfully.
Yeah. Let's have a look what's unfolded up till now. Obviously, we saw on Friday, the former president filed that application with the Constitutional Court to rescind its judgment, which we know condemned him to 15 months in prison. But what he said is that the constitutionality of the criminal procedure, insofar as it fails or omits to cater for or afford the normal fair trial right to persons facing imprisonment. Let's ask this question. From what you heard him saying at the press conference, or the media briefing that he had in Kandla on Sunday night, giving his view, do you think he was afforded ample opportunities to engage with the court and his position on Justice Zondo?
Well, Justice Sisi Kampepe dealt at length with this in the contempt judgment. Jacob Zuma was given a trial. He just chose not to participate in it. He chose to repeatedly not respond or not honor invitations offered to him by the inquiry to testify. In many ways, he said, no, it was health issues. But he also didn't respond to the evidence given by over 40 people that implicated him. He also didn't respond to requests for specific information in relation to Eskom and Prasa. He was asked for affidavits. He then, there's a subpoena application, extraordinary application. There were multiple other subpoenas issued. There was no argument about that, but Jacob Zuma had input. Ultimately, a subpoena is granted against him. He then brings an application for Zondo's recusal. Zondo refuses that. Jacob Zuma walks out. He now says because he wanted to get medication. But that essentially puts the ball in motion for the application by the to the Constitutional Court to compel him to testify. He's then ordered, you need to go and testify and answer non-incriminating questions that don't directly incriminate you in crime. He says, no, I'm bringing an application to force Zondo's recusal in the High Court. He now acknowledges that he should have interdicted the subpoenas issued against him in order to successfully, bring that application and not go to to the Constitutional Court. He didn't do that. He was criticized at length by the justices for not doing that. He doesn't go. And in the interim, defies the Constitutional Court, and all the way through it is issuing public statements where he essentially compares the highest court in the land to the apartheid government, says it's persecuting him like the apartheid state persecuted PAC leader Robert Sobukwe. His term in detention was extended unlawfully for something like 6 years. Then he goes, the inquiry brings a contempt case against him, chooses not to participate. Now says, it was because I didn't have money for lawyers. Then when the court is saying, look, we're going to find you, essentially we're going to find you guilty of contempt, please provide us with input on an appropriate sanction or what you believe an appropriate sanction would be, your circumstances, all the kind of grounds that he's raising now about his ill health, etc. And he says no. He writes a letter to Chief Justice Mogoeng where he again disparages the court and said, quote unquote, he was ready and willing to become a prisoner of the Constitutional Court. So in that circumstance, the court now saying that, he was given every opportunity that he could have had to put his side of the story, to interact in this hearing. He simply chose not to do so. And the inquiry argues in court papers that absenting yourself from a court process is not the same as having a, sort of detention without trial scenario. He was given the chance to participate. He just chose not to.
Yeah. Even though he came through and gave his reasoning and said that he has been on more than one occasion saying that he feels that Zondo is compromised and that he is not the right man to hear this particular sitting of the state capture for him to be there because he is compromised and he had requested that somebody else hear him. I mean, is he well within his right to ask for something like that? And this is what he's basing the entire argument on, basically.
Well, sorry, Leanne, I've got like a manifest attack of hay fever, so you're just going to have to deal.
I know, I can see.
I'm sorry, it's the early morning. No, you see, the thing is interesting is he's adopting a similar line in regard to the NPA. I mean, he said he's made similar attacks in the past. He said, Thuli Madonsela was biased against him, had her own agenda. He said the NPA, Billy Downer, is too biased against him to be able to triumph for corruption. And his entire, he must be acquitted of corruption in its entirety because the NPA is biased against him. So this argument of this person is biased against me, I am not prepared to answer questions, is a vein that runs through pretty much any time he's asked to account for his conduct. And he said the same, similar things about the Constitutional Court, that, they are acting out of political agenda. I mean, he said as much in his letter to Mogoeng. But Zondo was saying in his press conference, well, if that was the case, what would have happened? Yeah. Like, someone else must be brought in, they must hear evidence. Must that person then provide a separate judgment or report to Ramaphosa? What exactly does this look like? And you must remember, Leanne, that the former president is at the heart of the allegations of state capture that are being investigated. In relation to Eskom, how Eskom was the Russian nuclear deal, ANN7, the hiring and firing of ministers. So his responses will fall into all these different aspects of what the commission is investigating. So essentially, if that were the case, it could seriously legally compromise the commission. And also, he hasn't pursued this recusal application. He bought it. The inquiry then filed a Rule 53 record of the decision that it led Zondo to make the call that he did. Zuma hasn't taken that case any further. So, if he bought a successful recusal application and the High Court said, there's clear evidence Zondo's biased against you, then maybe he would have a leg to stand on. Yeah. But at this point, that simply hasn't happened, and he hasn't pursued that case. So it's not really a basis to say, well, I shouldn't be expected to answer the questions.
All right, so let's wrap it up in the simplest way we can, because at this point we all need a law degree, and we need to be as familiar with the law as you are. But let's try and put it in the simplest terms. Firstly, today's court appearance and the fact that there is this warrant hanging over his head, that we have until tomorrow, he could possibly still be arrested. Is there any chance that anything is going to happen in this High Court? You've said this is the wrong court. We've seen these papers being filed. What are your predictions for today?
Well, I think the inquiry's made it very clear that they believe that this application, this interdict application, is legally unsustainable. It's very possible, but I mean, there's a heightened political atmosphere around this whole thing, so it's very, very unpredictable. We are charting in extraordinary, unprecedented circumstances. We have never had a scenario where this has happened before. So we really are, there's no rule book. But, I think the most important development right now is exactly what Khehla Sitole has put out there, that the police are saying, well, we're not going to do anything unless the ConCourt explicitly orders us to. Or gives us directives to. And I think that is going to be the biggest issue at play here, because, obviously there's going to need to be some certainty over that, because otherwise the allegation that Jacob Zuma receives special treatment, that he's not equal before the law, and that the police are somehow, subtly acknowledging that, is going to be a profound issue. Yeah. The inquiry has made a very strong series of arguments, 4 in total, as to why they believe Zuma's application should be dismissed. But ultimately, it's up to the court to decide if he has made such a compelling case that his imminent arrest would be, quote unquote, a death sentence, that they simply will override those kind of concerns and cases and grant him the stay of execution that he's seeking. Yeah.
So that's today. I mean, if we look at today, chances are we're not going to be seeing an arrest taking place on the deadline of Wednesday. If everything we're hearing and seeing goes according to the way it's looking like. Then, of course, we move to Monday, which is now, there's still a whole week between that almost, and a lot could happen. But we're also asking the question about civil rights organisation AfriForum also jumping onto the bandwagon here, saying they'll be a friend of the court, and also saying that Jacob Zuma is receiving special treatment by the court in violation of the principle that everyone is equal before the law. So that's what they're saying. Now we're going to the Constitutional Court on Monday. I mean, when we look at Justice Kampepe and what she said, she was very scathing and very, very down the line and honest as to the ruling and the way it was, and quite strict thereof. But now, what room do they have to move? I mean, do you think there'll be any change? Does the former president have any chance of something changing come Monday?
Well, the inquiry has argued that Jacob Zuma's rescission application is also fatally legally flawed. They point out that rescission is really only granted, in terms of the court rules in circumstances where, a manifest injustice has occurred because someone hasn't been afforded a hearing that they should have been afforded. Arguing again that Jacob Zuma, that's not the case with him. He was afforded a hearing. He just chose not to participate in it, and is now belatedly attempting to put evidence and argument on the table. This wasn't a default judgment. This isn't a case where now new documents have come to light which show that evidence was incorrect. The court has not made a mistake. None of these factors are at play. So the legal bases for rescission, they're saying none of them have been met by Jacob Zuma. The issue, I think, which is going to be significant, is the issue of sanction. He's come out and said, listen, I'm an elderly person. I'm 79 years old. I have this undisclosed medical condition, but I'm the most vulnerable person when it comes to COVID-19. Going to jail could effectively be a death sentence to me.
All right.
The inquiry is saying, listen, if you want to raise those arguments, raise them with correctional services. Ask for early parole. But the horse is bolted. You were given the opportunity. You can't make those arguments now. And what the Constitutional Court does with that kind of argument, those key issues, is going to be pivotal. Because, that language, that emotive language of you're effectively going to send me to my death, I think is going to be one that resonates throughout that court hearing on Monday.
All right. Well, thank you for your interpretation, and thanks so much always for just explaining what's going on with all these legal complexities. That's Karyn Maughan, legal journalist at News 24, talking to us about former President Jacob Zuma filing an urgent application to the Pietermaritzburg High Court for his stay of execution of his arrest. All right. That's a big thing we'll be following today, so do stay tuned to the program. But right now, just after 7, let's get the news. I'll hand you over to Sakina.